Hi, welcome back to Zack of All Trades. I'm Zack, and today I'm going to start the process of actually putting up our little cabin. Cabin, shed, boat shed, whatever we're calling it. Really, I'm pretty excited about this because it's pretty close, like within, I don't know, 75 feet or so of one of our potential build spots. So we can store our stuff in here. We can throw a couple of cots or something in it, and we can spend a little bit of time here in this spot as kind of as home, you know, to kind of get the feel of it. Right down here is where we would likely build if we were to build here, probably right around this area, because it opens up into this beautiful little bowl situation down here that would of course show up a lot more after some tree trimming and such. But let me just walk you down here and give you the gist of the thing. There we go. And here we have this nice little bowl. We had thought about building right here, or considered building right here, but it seems like from right here, and I don't know if the camera will really show it, but if you're standing right here, it feels a little bit, I don't know, it feels a little bit claustrophobic, a little bit closed in. Maybe not, maybe we're overthinking it, but this is the scenery that's behind all the bushes that we'll be seeing from up there. Of course, like I said, once we clear the bushes out. So like any other building, the first thing to consider is the foundation. Now, since this building is not going to be exactly what you call a permanent structure, I'm not going to be, of course, pouring a slab. Instead of that, I'm going to put this up on cornerstones, and we're going to go from there. So here's what I've got for a foundation. These are all big rocks gathered from right here on the property. While I've been driving around, I kind of kept an eye out for big rocks because I knew I was going to be doing this. That's what I got to get unloaded. As I was out picking rock, I debated a lot as to what was the right size. I eventually settled on, if I can just barely lift it, that's the right size of rock I need. Oh, and I had the good fortune of finding somebody else who was taking their covered wagon to town, so I had him pick me up a primer bulb and a can of carburetor soaking goop. And now, Grassy's weed whacker runs perfectly. Okay, well maybe it doesn't run perfectly. It runs good enough to get the job done. So it's time to clear the site. Right. You know, I'm certainly not a mason, but I imagine if I was, I'd have some appropriate words to say at this ceremonial moment. Since I'm not, what I've got is Christ alone, cornerstone, running through my head. Pretty cool song. That's I like the symbolism, anyhow, the symbolic nature of laying a cornerstone. It's level, it's square, and if we build everything off of that, and I don't mean to wax poetic nor preachy on you, but if we build everything off of that cornerstone, everything will remain square and level, much like Christ as the cornerstone of our life. It's easier said than done, but looking at Him for our cornerstone as our standard makes things a lot more likely to be square and level. As a consequence of not having any 20-foot 2x4s available at my local home improvement store, I opted to scarf together two 10-foot 2x4s to make my 20-foot sill plate. I did my very best to get it straight, which was easier said than done. I've got that first board in place, and it is level, or as perfectly level as it's going to be are here in the weeds. And I have to remember that I'm building a shed cabin thing, not the Taj Mahal. So I'm going to do my very best, but I'm not going to sweat it if it's not perfect. So it occurs to me that I don't have a real good way to make sure that this whole thing is square, seeing how when this is complete, I'm just going to have the outside board and the outside board on the other side. This guy right here, this is just kind of for mock-up. There's not going to be anything right there. So what I determined was that this 2x4 is actually square, and I did this before I had that 1x on the top of it. Anyway, I determined that the cut on the end of this 2x4 is squared, and then moved this 1x until it feels square, and now it looks pretty doggone square. So in order to prove this, I'm going to rely on old Pythagoras. Now you may recall Pythagoras was that guy that said that a squared plus b squared will equal c squared. Well, that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make a right triangle. Well, I really don't care about the triangle, but I'm trying to make a 90-degree angle over there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure 10 foot and mark it. And I already know where my 10 foot is over here because I have two 10-foot boards scabbed together. So a squared, 10, that's 100, plus b squared, that's 200, should equal c squared. So 200, the square root of 200, I did this math off the camera, is 14.14. So when you translate that into feet, it comes out to be 14 foot 1.68 inches. So I think that this is going to be close enough for what we're doing here. Maybe I ought to hook it over here. Let me notch this guy a little bit with my knife so it will hold the tape. Only if I'm careful. $14 foot 1 and a little over 3/4. So right at about 3/4. So I'm going to move it just a little bit. Check it again. All right. That's it right there. That's square. So now I have the location. Come on, tape measure. I have the location of where my next rock needs to go. Oh boy, that is level right out of the gate. Holy smokes. Imagine that, will you? Cool. Now we just got to do the same thing on this other corner. And now after a lot of digging, much of it with my chainsaw tool because it's clay, yippee, clay, and it's dried clay, I finally got that stone set in the ground, and now I can set up the other side. After getting the other side all set up and leveled and squared, I went ahead and drove in 4 stakes and screwed them into my sills to hold them in place after all that hard work of all that squaring. Then I brought in my bow halves and laid them down in place. And what it doesn't show very well is I put rocks, big rocks, on the end, I guess the left end as you're looking at this, so that when I pushed the bows up, it would prevent the bottom of them from trying to slide off. It was somewhat successful. I did later figure out a better way to do it. So what I'm doing here is I screwed into each side a brace so that when I did get the bow pushed up, that I would have something to screw it into it and then hold it in place. I also tied on a string to the very top so it would fall off of the right side of this as you're looking at it, so as I could use it as a plumb bob, as well as being able to hold on to that string just in case I pushed the whole thing too far and it tried to fall over backwards. I could hold on to that string. I also put on this little kind of A brace to hold everything as rigid as possible. That later turned out to be not quite as necessary as I thought, but you know, you learn as you go. So this pole that I've got here was, I think, about 17 feet long with a little bit of a crook in the end of it, which is what I've got hooked onto the peak of my bow there. It had to be obviously longer than the bow was tall so that I could do this angle business here. And here I'm screwing in braces that I had thankfully pre-positioned. And now I put down this board, which is a level, not level, but a straight board. And I'm going to tie on my chainsaw tool to the bottom of this string that I had previously tied to the top. And I'm going to use that as my plumb bob. I'm going to use the right edge, I guess, as you're looking at this, the right edge of that squaring board as my reference point for my plumb bob. After I got everything set up, I just unscrewed the bottom leg of my little brace and walked it along just a little bit at a time in order to square that thing up and get it nice and plumb.
Looks to me to be pretty plumb. Here, let me give you a look at it.
How about that, huh? Ha! Yay! I don't know how I'm going to reach the top to put the ridgepole in on. Anyway, let me give you an idea how big it is. Okay, I'm standing directly underneath it. So this thing is it's gonna have some pretty good size to it. I'm pretty excited about this. Alright. Time to build the second one. Much like anything else that you get better as you do it more, I've learned a few things. Let me show you. The first thing I figured out is that by screwing an extra block onto the top of my sill here, and then putting one screw into the kind of bottom corner of this leg, it holds it there. It holds it from trying to go out. It holds it from trying to slide down the board. It holds everything in place. And since I put it on the kind of on the bottom corner here, it gives me a nice pivot point. Then once I've got the bottom of both legs held in place, and I bring this together, it can't not be in the right place. So all I gotta do is bring that together, hold it, and drop a couple of screws into it. And now I'm ready to push it up, which brings me to my next improvement. I've added this board onto my lifting pole so that at every point it's always wider than the hole it's going into. That way it can't slip off of the branch stub like it was doing before. And now, holding on to this string, of course, just in case I push it over center and it tries to tip over, holding on to this string, I can push it right up. Just like that. Now comes the next part that I figured out. That's the fact that, well, I made 5. I made 5 bows. I have a 20-foot long structure, and the bows are supposed to be spaced 4 feet. Somehow my math got mixed up, and I thought that that was going to work. So I made 5 of them instead of 6. So I'm presented with the options. I thought about spacing them all out evenly, spacing them out in 5-foot spaces. But that's going to mess up all my sheathing, everything else that'll mess it up on down the road. So I went ahead and put them up at 4-foot increments. And so now my 2 choices are, I can either just stop at 16 foot. That's not really going to work because my boat's longer than that, just barely. I can either stop at 16 foot, or I can go ahead and build one last bow, which I think with the extra 1-bys that I bought, I can actually build one more bow with 1-by material rather than the plywood. So I can actually give that a try and see if that
works better than that other business. But that's going to have to be for a different day. So that's going to do it for today. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you'll tune in again real soon. We'll see you again. Take care.